When I hugged my mother for the last time, I didn't know it would be the final encounter where her hands didn't feel like chains, and her words weren't barbs. I didn't know that moment when she smiled and said, "We're all family, you'll always be needed," would turn out to be yet another deceitful manipulation hidden behind the mask of love. My name is Lucretia, and at 32 years old, I've spent the last decade building my career as a manager. During this time, my younger sisters, Sarah and Alessia, started their own families, while I climbed the corporate ladder like a diligent worker bee. Don't get me wrong, I love my job. It's my haven, my fortress. But sometimes, amidst business calls, meetings, and reports, I wonder, have I missed something vital, something that can't be measured in figures and achievements on paper? No husband, no children, just me, my corner office overlooking the bustling city streets, where cars scurry below and skyscraper lights twinkle above. It was a typical Tuesday morning when my phone rang, displaying Sarah's name. My younger sister, always spirited and energetic, even at 26. I set aside a stack of reports, trying to grasp moments between reviewing figures and processing new data. "Hey, Lucretia," her voice came through as I leaned back in my chair, listening to her news. "You remember Mom's turning 60 in 2 months, right?" she continued, pausing to give me time to grasp the significance of the occasion. I nodded, though my thoughts were far away, tangled in spreadsheets and deadlines. Mom, who always cared for us, cooked meals, and supported our endeavors, would soon celebrate this milestone birthday. "We're planning something special," Sarah added, "and we're meeting everyone to pool contributions." That caught my attention. "What exactly are you planning?" I cautiously shifted my gaze from the reports to the phone screen, mentally calculating how much time this would require. Sarah, true to form, didn't hold back details. "We're throwing a party, a big party. And everyone's chipping in," she declared, as if this wasn't just an event but a major project hinging on my involvement. When she mentioned the amount they expected from everyone, I nearly choked on my coffee. It was more than I'd spent on my last vacation, which, to be honest, was 3 years ago. I fell silent, opening my banking app and preparing to transfer the funds. Sarah quickly added, "I know it's a lot, but it's for Mom. You understand, don't you?" And I truly did. This was one of those moments where familial love and obligation collided with the reality of finances and responsibilities. "It's fine," I said, already transferring the money to the specified account. But the conversation didn't end there. "And don't forget to take a week off work," she continued. "It's important, Lucretia. Keep that week clear." I agreed, though thoughts of juggling meetings and deadlines began to whirl in my mind. The next few weeks flew by in a blur. Meetings, tasks, and reports rolled in like waves. Occasionally, I wondered what my sisters were planning with all that money, but every time I asked, they brushed me off with vague answers. They'd always been less pragmatic than me, and I felt they bore the weight of organizing this celebration. My job consumed me, and Mom's birthday gradually took a back seat. Then came that evening, a Saturday family dinner at our parents' house. Mom, Dad, my sisters, Aunt Nicoletta with her kids, and my cousins Amendo and Rachel. The familiar, cozy chaos of a family dinner where Dad always retold the same old jokes, and Mom bustled around setting the table. I sat there, watching it all, feeling both at home and detached from this world, so distant from my ambitions. That's when Sarah, absent-mindedly pushing peas around her plate, casually but deliberately announced, "We all decided to spend a week at Mountain Pine Resort. It's our gift to Mom for her birthday." The table erupted in lively chatter. Mom beamed, her eyes shining with happiness. Dad was already imagining skiing, and my sisters were discussing which trails they wanted to try. I, setting down my fork and knife, felt a knot tighten inside me. Why not? I thought, but the words caught in my throat. Why is no one telling me these things sooner? I asked, feeling a little left out. On top of that, I didn't even own a proper ski outfit, and there were only a few days left before the trip. Silence fell. Mom cleared her throat a few times, and I felt my stomach churn as if bracing for something significant. When she finally spoke, I was prepared for something unexpected. Actually, dear, she began in that soft tone I'd always recognized as the prelude to a request, we were hoping you could help us all out by watching the kids while we're at the resort. I stared at my family, waiting for someone to laugh and say it was just a joke, but the silence lingered. That moment when everything at the table pauses, and all eyes turn to you. You want me to babysit? All 5 of them? I finally managed to say, counting them off in my head, Alessia's toddler Gaston, Sarah's daughter Lucy, cousins Amendo's twins Tom and Anna, and Bryce's son Pete, all under the age of 7. I felt a tightening in my chest, as though this request was the final straw. Looking at my family, I tried to understand why they couldn't handle this themselves. Well, you're so good with them, Mom said, as if that explained everything. They love their Aunt Lucretia. Her words sounded like reassurance, but they did nothing to ease my discomfort. I glanced around the table again. Everyone seemed to agree with her. My sisters, parents, Aunt Nicoletta, they all sat there, waiting for my usual yes, as if I were just another cog in the machine, a part of something that would always be there, always ready to help, no matter my own wishes or exhaustion. But this time, I couldn't respond. I couldn't just agree. I felt something inside me shouting in protest. No, this isn't fair, I blurted out, and immediately felt the weight of their stares on me. Silence settled over the table, but despite the unspoken pressure, I couldn't bring myself to simply bow to their expectations. I want to celebrate with you too, I said, the words spilling out almost mechanically, not because I truly wanted to, but because I needed to say something, anything. I tried to understand what was happening inside me. A coldness gripped me, refusing to let go. You're great with kids, they adore you, Alessia added, not even pausing her meal. This wasn't the first time she'd said something like this, but this time her words felt especially sharp. And let's be honest, it's not like you need a break from family life. I felt a tightness in my chest, an unpleasant constriction. How do you know whether I would feel bored or not? That might have been my last chance to object, but my voice betrayed me, trembling as I tried to speak. Sarah jumped in, as if stating the obvious. She just means that you don't have kids. There was a flicker of carelessness in her eyes, and her tone carried the familiar condescension I had long since learned to recognize. You don't have a family. You don't need a break. You don't understand. I felt a surge of anger boil inside me. Oh, how I didn't understand. How I didn't understand that my life, my efforts, my years, all the sacrifices I'd made to support them and our parents, could be so easily dismissed. I had been too caught up, too preoccupied with their needs to notice that time was passing, and I was being left behind. I stood up without saying a word. It was as if I had silently decided to leave, hoping to make them realize that this scene had hurt me. This time, I didn't allow myself to lose control or let the tears fall. I simply grabbed my bag from the counter and headed for the door. Mom called after me, but I didn't turn back. The family's voices continued discussing the trip plans, ski slopes, and winter gear. I felt like I had been cast aside. They didn't know how I felt, because they had never taken the time to think about me. There wasn't even a hint of consideration for my feelings in any of it. The evening air was crisp. I walked down the street, the cold seeping into my bones, clearing my mind. Years I had spent giving everything to others. My work, my corner office, my flawless reputation, none of it had brought me joy when I looked deeper. In return, all I had gained was guilt and regret. But what had I truly gained? A family that took me for granted, like a mechanism holding everything together, without which it would all collapse. I was missing love. I was missing what they had once promised me, to value and respect me. I felt unnecessary. All night, I wandered around my apartment, replaying memories, moments where I had always been in the background. For far too long, I had played a role that was imposed on me. I was the eldest sister who always had a shoulder to lend, but what did I get in return? How many times had I put my family first, forgetting about myself? How many sacrifices had I made to ensure everyone else's happiness? When I was 16, I cooked dinner while Mom helped Alessia with homework. At 18, I gave up a trip with friends to babysit Sarah while my parents went on vacation. At 21, I worked 2 jobs to pay for Alessia's prom dress. The images kept flooding back, year after year. Sacrifice after sacrifice. Lucretia, could you watch Gaston? Alessia's voice echoed in my memory. I couldn't live like this anymore. I had always said, yes, always. Even when I had critical meetings the next day, even when I was drained from a grueling workweek, even when every muscle in my body screamed for rest, I still said yes. I had prided myself on being the reliable, responsible sister, the perfect daughter. That was my role, always available, always ready to help. And now, sitting on my couch, I realized it wasn't a choice, it had been a necessity. The cool surface of the fabric pressed against my tired skin as I closed my eyes, trying to make sense of everything. The photo albums on the coffee table caught my attention, images where I was always behind the camera. Family vacations where I stood off to the side as the others smiled joyfully. Holiday gatherings where I stayed in the kitchen while everyone else laughed and celebrated in the living room. When was the last time someone asked me what I wanted? When was the last time I was simply part of the moment? When Sarah said, "You don't need a break from family life," it felt like a verdict. My efforts, my career, my sacrifices, it was as if none of it mattered. Because I wasn't married and didn't have children, that was enough to erase everything I'd done for them. Sleep didn't come easily that night. I tossed and turned, remembering how I'd put myself through college on a scholarship to avoid burdening my parents. How I had started working right after graduation to help my sisters finish their studies. Sleepless nights at the office, climbing the career ladder, sending part of my salary home to cover family expenses. I had always strived to be the peacemaker, to avoid conflict, to find compromises. But now, I realized that this constant willingness to accommodate had cost me dearly. I waited until a reasonable hour so as not to disturb Mom at night, then called her on Sunday morning. "Hi, Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice steady and emotionless. "I've been thinking about the trip to the resort. Actually, I have a solution. I'll hire a professional nanny for all 5 kids so that everyone can enjoy the celebration and some peace." A silence hung on the other end of the line, followed by a voice tense with an edge I hadn't expected. "That won't work, Lucretia. We can't leave the kids with some stranger. They're used to you." "Mom, I want to be part of the celebration too." I tried to explain as best I could that I wanted to be there for the birthday, that this gathering mattered to me, that I could find an excellent nanny with great references. But Mom interrupted me. "You're not exactly a social butterfly," she said sharply. "You'll probably feel uncomfortable with all the noise and commotion anyway. The kids will keep you busy, and you'll enjoy spending time with them. It's perfect for everyone." The click of the call ending echoed in my ear. For a moment, I sat there, phone still pressed to my ear, mulling over the sharpness of her words. She hadn't even said goodbye. My mind was racing, but I tried to calm myself. And then the phone rang again, Sarah's name lit up on the screen. My chest tightened, and I felt a wave of anxiety rise inside me. Before I could even say hello, an angry voice burst through the receiver. "How dare you?" she hissed, not giving me a moment to respond. "Mom just told me about your little proposal to hire a nanny. Are you trying to ruin everything?" Her hostile tone caught me off guard. I sat there gripping the phone, feeling hurt wash over me. I'm just trying to find a solution that works for everyone, I tried to explain, but Sarah didn't let me finish. We already have a solution, she snapped, her anger practically cutting off my words as though they had never been spoken. I hung up and found myself back in silence. This entire situation, all their expectations, their needs, which I'd catered to for years, echoed in those words, and I realized I couldn't keep living solely for their convenience. Sarah's voice lingered in my mind like a heavy echo. Everything is planned, Lucretia, everything, and now you're being completely selfish, trying to change all our arrangements. Those words hit me like a slap, sharp and painful. Selfish? Yes, I was being selfish. So what? Somehow, their plans, their expectations, had become my obligations. I was the one who always adapted, always said yes, without considering my own needs. We've been planning this for weeks, everyone's excited, the resort is booked, the activities are scheduled, and now you want to ruin everything because you can't do this one thing for the family? Her voice hammered away, relentless, like a sledgehammer pounding at what little was left standing. My hand began to tremble at the weight of the thought, the pain, the pressure they imposed on me. Are you serious? She asked, her words boiling with anger and disappointment. You know, if you ruin this trip for everyone, if you ruin Mom's birthday, don't bother talking to me again. Before I could respond, the call ended. The silence that followed was so thick, it felt as though every sound in my mind had lost its meaning. Only emptiness remained, a void where even thoughts couldn't find a foothold. I sat there, staring at my phone in disbelief over what had just happened. Staring at the screen, I noticed a new flurry of messages lighting it up. Sarah. Again. Families need to stick together, the first message read, dripping with accusation. We all help each other. The next, more pointed, remember how I watered your plants last year while you were at that conference? Another followed with a personal jab, you're good with kids. They love you. Why can't you just put your grudge aside and think about what's best for the family? These messages rained down on me like an unrelenting storm, as though they expected me to rush to them, filled with contrition. Instead, I felt anger building. Anger at how easily they manipulated me, how they had grown accustomed to using me. My fingers moved quickly over the keyboard, surprising me with their speed. My response flowed out. A real family doesn't use each other for their own convenience. A real family respects each other's wishes and includes everyone in their plans. A real family doesn't manipulate or guilt-trip one another. I didn't want to stop. I realized this wasn't just something they needed to hear, it was something I needed to say for myself. I couldn't let them continue deciding for me, manipulating my decisions, using my money and efforts as their own resources. There was no reply. The typing bubbles appeared, then disappeared, but, as always, nothing changed. I understood they were trying to make me feel guilty, as though I truly was the one ruining their perfect world. It dawned on me that they had been manipulating me all along. All these secret arrangements, made behind my back, without me, without considering my desires or needs. They had always expected me to stay silent, to agree, to fit neatly into their plans. They wanted me to keep being the perfect daughter and sister, with no voice, no choice of my own. And when I stopped playing by their rules, they resorted to every possible manipulation and threat. But something strange happened when I finally saw it all through the fog of manipulation. Suddenly, as if I'd awakened from years of sleep, everything became crystal clear. I felt relief, almost physical, as though the weight I had carried on my shoulders for so long had suddenly disappeared. A sense of determination arose within me, one I hadn't felt in years. I opened my laptop and began searching. Within an hour, I had booked a beach hotel in Florida. It wasn't extravagant, but it had a balcony overlooking the ocean, exactly what I needed for a real break. Everything I could possibly want was just a short walk away. And, of course, I splurged on a first-class ticket, Why waste time and economy when you know you deserve better? After all, I had plenty of savings, since I never spent money on things like ski resorts or other family outings. The next few days at work passed surprisingly peacefully. My family had stopped calling and messaging. They probably assumed I was at home, preparing for a week of babysitting, perhaps stocking up on extra snacks and planning activities. The thought made me smile as I packed beachwear and a new swimsuit, ready for a tropical escape in the middle of winter. Later that evening, my coworker Janet noticed me checking the weather in Florida and asked, "Are you going somewhere?" I replied that sometimes you just have to do something unexpected. And truly, it felt wonderfully liberating to say those words out loud, as if I had just discovered a new world where I could live the way I wanted. The morning of my flight, standing in the doorway of my apartment, I turned around to take one last look: an empty fridge, spotless surfaces, securely locked windows. Everything was in perfect order, as always, except this time, I wouldn't be here. No calls asking me to watch the kids, no unfinished tasks lingering in the background. In that moment, I felt a lightness returning to me, freeing me from the invisible weight I had grown so accustomed to carrying. I turned off my phone and tucked it into my bag, not thinking about social media, not checking emails, not engaging with family drama. Just me, the beach, and a full week of freedom. As I stepped out of the airport in Florida, the warm air wrapped around me like a gentle embrace. Palm trees swayed in the breeze, and the salty scent of the ocean filled my lungs. It was indescribably sweet, like a long overdue reunion with something familiar and infinite. My hotel room was even better than the photos, with a stunning balcony view of the endless blue sea. I stood on the balcony, listening to the waves crashing against the shore, feeling their rhythm fill me with peace and harmony. On the first day, I walked barefoot along the beach, letting the warm sand slip between my toes, immersing myself in the moment. When was the last time I did something just for myself? The answer was clear: far too long ago. I swam in the pool, read a book without interruptions, and dined at a quiet beachfront restaurant where no one spilled drinks on the table or asked me to cut their food. I savored every sip of wine, watching the sunset, unhurried, without a thought for tomorrow. My mornings began without plans or rush, and I felt like I had rediscovered the freedom I'd always dreamed of. On the last day of my vacation, I lay in bed, savoring the final moments of peace, knowing that soon I would have to return to reality, turn on my phone, and face the chaos I'd left behind. When I finally powered it on, the phone buzzed incessantly with a flood of messages, voicemails, and missed calls, hundreds of them. The timestamps revealed they had started a week ago, early in the morning. My hands trembled slightly as I began scrolling through them. The first messages were from Sarah. "Where are you?" "We're outside your house." Then Alessia chimed in. "Lucretia, open the door. The kids are getting restless." Followed by, Amendo, "Hi, we've brought Tom and Anna as planned. Are you home?" I could already picture the scene: my sisters and cousins standing outside my empty house with 5 confused kids, their suitcases packed for the resort, their meticulously planned trip unraveling before their eyes. The tone of the messages shifted from confusion to panic. "Lucretia, this isn't funny. Where are you? Answer your phone. What are we supposed to do with the kids? You can't just disappear like this." Then came the anger. Sarah's messages grew harsher. "You selfish witch, how could you do this to us?" Alessia wasn't far behind. "I can't believe how immature you are. Mom's birthday is ruined because of you." Even Nicoletta, usually reserved, sent biting words. "You ungrateful brat, you've destroyed everything these kids were looking forward to." Reading their words, I felt a fire ignite inside me. But this time, I couldn't feel the guilt I once would have. This wasn't my responsibility. Mom's messages started later that same day. "I'm so disappointed in you, Lucretia. I never thought you would be this selfish after all we've done for you." Dad, who rarely texted, send a single message. Your mother is crying. I hope you're proud of yourself. The voicemails were worse. I could hear their anger, disappointment, and accusations. Even distant relatives I hadn't spoken to in months sent messages condemning my actions. You were always so reliable. How could you do this to your own family? These poor kids, you've ruined everything. I sat there in my peaceful hotel room, scrolling through message after message, realizing what my family truly thought of me when I finally stopped being their convenient solution, when I refused to dissolve myself into their expectations. What words they used, what names they called me, what assumptions they made about my character, all the labels and pointed accusations. It felt like meeting a completely new family, one that had been hiding behind fake smiles and routine requests for favors. Without responding to any of them, I packed my things and headed to the airport. It was time to go home, but I was no longer the same Lucretia who had left a week ago. The old Lucretia might have apologized, might have felt guilty, perhaps even tried to make amends. But that Lucretia was gone. The Lucretia who lived for others, who always adjusted to meet their expectations and plans, had been swept away by the evening winds of Florida, along with her habitual sense of obligation. I had just finished unpacking my beachwear when I heard an aggressive knock at the door. Before I could reach it, I heard the key turn in the lock. It was the emergency key I'd given my mother years ago, just in case, and now it was being used to storm into my home like an enraged hurricane. There they were, Mom in the center, flanked by Alessia and Sarah, their faces red, their eyes wild, their expressions brimming with fury. The peace I had nurtured in Florida evaporated instantly, like smoke. Do you even realize what you've done? Sarah shouted, stepping forward. You've ruined everything, everything. I stood there, watching as they unleashed their anger in my living room, the same living room where I had babysat their children countless times, canceled my own plans to accommodate their emergencies, and always been the reliable anchor. Mike and John, Alessia and Sarah's husbands, had refused to stay with the kids and were nowhere to be found when help was needed. We stayed with the kids only because the trip had to be organized. Alessia snapped, her resentment boiling over. Both of them suddenly had important things to do, so Sarah was stuck with the kids, and you missed Mom's birthday because of it. Don't you see you've ruined everything? Mom, continuing the tirade, added, the entire trip was a disaster because of you. No one could enjoy themselves. We spent the whole time talking about how you betrayed us, how you let everyone down. My father, who didn't even ski well, had been so upset that he apparently brought up my absence repeatedly. The three of them kept shouting, interrupting one another, each trying to outdo the other and expressing their disappointment and anger. The more they spoke, the more absurd it all sounded to me. And then, something inside me snapped, but not in the way they expected. I started laughing. The sound of my laughter cut through their accusations like a knife. They stopped mid-sentence, staring at me as if I'd lost my mind. What's so funny? Mom demanded, her face growing even redder. What could possibly be funny about this situation? I wiped tears of laughter from my eyes and looked at them, not hiding my astonishment. Don't you see how ridiculous this is? Don't you understand how absurd you all sound right now? Alessia muttered, what's absurd about secretly planning a trip like this? But my laughter didn't stop. You decided for me, without asking, that I would look after your children. You took my money, told me to take time off work, and just assumed I'd fall in line with your plans. And now, when everything fell apart because of your assumptions, you're calling me the villain? They fell silent. But you've always helped before, Mom murmured, her voice quieter now, tinged with embarrassment. That's exactly the problem, I replied, my tone firm. You stopped seeing me as a daughter or sister and started seeing me as a convenient babysitter. You stopped considering my feelings, my plans, my life. And now you demand that I drop everything for your wishes, as if I'm just a resource to be used whenever needed. That's not true. Sarah protested, though her voice lacked confidence, betraying tension and confusion. She wasn't ready for me to push back. I raised an eyebrow, letting my disbelief show. Then why didn't you include me in the planning? Why didn't you ask if I wanted to go to the resort? Why did you assume I'd be happy to stay behind with 5 kids while everyone else celebrated? I watched their faces, hoping for even a flicker of recognition, a hint of understanding, but all I saw was their expressions hardening and growing colder. That's when it became clear to me that my words hadn't reached them. "You're selfish," Mom finally said, her voice cold as ice. "You ruined my birthday, hurt your sisters, disappointed the kids. I didn't raise you to be like this." Each word landed like a blow, but I refused to let them break me. I could hear the finality in her voice, the last-ditch hope that I might back down. But I didn't. "No, Mom," I said, calm and resolute. "You're the one being selfish in this situation." I could feel something shift inside me, not anger, but indifference. And in that moment, I realized that I was no longer the Lucretia who would bend, smooth things over, and sacrifice herself for the sake of peace. "This is your fault, not mine," I said, standing firm against their barrage, with a calm they couldn't understand. Mom straightened to her full height, her face stony. She looked determined, but her eyes betrayed something else, fear. "If that's how you feel, then maybe I don't have a daughter named Lucretia," she said, her words like the strike of a hammer. But I was ready. "Then so be it," I replied quietly. 6 weeks have passed since that final confrontation in my living room. 6 weeks of silence, interrupted only by occasional notifications when someone in the family posted thinly veiled jabs on social media. "Some people only think about themselves," Mom wrote last week, followed by a dozen sympathetic comments from relatives and family friends who only knew her version of the story. Family should always come first. It was the same refrain, repeated over and over, as if it might somehow bring me back into their fold. Yesterday, Sarah posted a picture of her daughter, surrounded by the whole family, looking happy. I read her caption, brimming with pretentiousness, "So blessed to be surrounded by love." I felt a pang of irritation at the falseness of it all, the way it cloaked good intentions that never went beyond pretty words. Were there people in my life who understood what that truly meant? Among all those faces hiding their selfishness behind gestures of kindness, were there any who could truly see my side? Alessia's latest post was a lengthy essay about toxic people who destroy family bonds with their selfishness. She accused me of ruining everything we had built together. I couldn't read those words without smirking. After all, it was they who, hiding behind the guise of family ties, had consistently manipulated me, refusing to accept me for who I am. I had long since realized that the only way to be free was to stop being part of their game. Maybe I shouldn't have reacted so harshly. Maybe I should have gritted my teeth and continued to endure. But what did I feel? I felt like they were draining the last of my strength, and I was no longer willing to be a convenient piece on their chessboard. With every passing day, the emptiness in my heart grew, along with the realization that no amount of their forgiveness or amends would bring me the peace I had found when I learned to let go. She, of course, didn't tag me in the post, but everyone knew who she was talking about. A few months ago, those posts would have devastated me. I would have spent hours crafting responses in my head, losing sleep over their words, wondering if they might be right. I would have fought for every word, every comment, trying to justify myself and explain my actions. But now I simply scroll past them with a faint smile, marveling at how predictable they've become. All those words, those accusations, those attempts to manipulate my emotions, they've lost their power. They no longer have the control they once did, the control that made me feel small and guilty. Instead of spending my weekends on standby for babysitting emergencies, I started rebuilding my life. Instead of being glued to my phone, fielding demands from my sisters or answering their exasperated questions, I joined a local book club. At the first meeting, sitting in a cozy cafe on a Saturday morning, I felt a strange sense of liberation knowing my phone wouldn't ring with desperate pleas from one of my sisters. I was no longer the one holding everything together, the one enduring, solving problems, and staying on the sidelines of her own life. I felt, for the first time, that I had the right to rest, to silence, to peace, without worrying about anyone else's expectations. Last week, I booked another vacation, a spring trip to Europe. I didn't check anyone's schedule or consider whether it might conflict with someone else's needs. I simply found a good deal and decided it would be mine. I no longer put others' priorities ahead of my own or sacrificed myself for something that should have been normal but had become an unbearable burden. Sometimes, in quiet moments, I think about my nieces and nephews. I miss them, but not the way they were used as tools against me. That was one of the most painful realizations, seeing the children I loved being turned into pawns of someone else's expectations and manipulations. I hope that someday, when they're older, they'll understand what really happened. Maybe they'll even recognize the same patterns in their own lives and choose differently. I believe people can change if they can see the truth, even if it takes time. I still have the spare key my mom used that last day. I should probably return it, but something stops me every time I think about it. Maybe a part of me still hopes they'll understand someday, that they'll realize how unfair their actions and expectations were. Maybe they'll see how they weaponized my love for them, taking advantage of the fact that I was always there, always willing to do anything for their well-being. But ultimately, I'm not waiting for that day. I no longer hope for their understanding or approval. I'm not pausing my life anymore, nor am I reshaping my reality to fit their demands. I've put myself first, and it feels right. Not because I stopped loving them, but because I learned to love myself. Yesterday, I deleted the family group chat from my phone. I didn't make an announcement about it or try to explain. I simply stepped away from yet another obligation, another source of stress. I no longer want to be the one who carries the weight of their expectations and complaints. I don't need to be part of a game where I'm always the one to blame, where my feelings and desires are the last things anyone considers. Some might call it selfishness, my family certainly does, but I've learned there's a difference between selfishness and self-respect. Sometimes the most helpful thing you can do for yourself is to walk away from people who don't see your value beyond what you can do for them. I don't owe them my sacrifices. And that doesn't mean I've stopped loving them. It means I've learned to take care of myself. And perhaps, that's what I've been missing all these years.